The woman in the emergency lane. It happened on Highway 287 in northern Texas, just outside Wichita Falls, on a cold November night in 2019. The highway was almost empty, the sky moonless, and the wind strong enough to push dust across the asphalt in long, trembling ribbons. Long-haul trucker David Mercer, 42, was hauling a refrigerated trailer full of produce from Amarillo to Dallas. It was around 2:40 a.m., the dead hour of the night when even the radio begins to sound hollow and distant. David had driven this stretch hundreds of times. Nothing about it scared him. He knew every rest stop, every exit, every shoulder where broken-down cars tended to appear. But that night, something already felt wrong before anything even happened. The air inside the cab felt cold, colder than it should have. The heaters were on, but he kept rubbing his hands together as if the warmth wasn't reaching his skin. He tried to shake it off and kept driving. About 30 miles north of Wichita Falls, he saw it. A white sedan sat in the emergency lane, hazard lights blinking in slow, uneven pulses. And beside it, illuminated by his headlights, stood a woman wearing what looked like a long white dress or nightgown. Her hair was long and dark, hanging forward as she kept her head slightly bowed. She didn't wave. She didn't step back. She just stood there, facing his truck as he approached. David instinctively slowed down. It was freezing, the middle of nowhere, and a stranded motorist at that hour was serious business. He shifted to the right and pulled over about 20 yards ahead of the sedan. The moment he stopped, every hair on his arms rose. He couldn't explain why. He just suddenly felt watched. He grabbed his flashlight, stepped out of the cab, and started walking toward the woman, though something inside him screamed not to. The wind was sharp, cutting across the plain, carrying the dry rustle of grass from beyond the ditch. "Ma'am," he called out. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman didn't respond. As he approached, he noticed something strange. The hazard lights were blinking, but the rhythm was wrong. Too slow, like a heartbeat fading in and out. He moved closer until he was only a few feet away. The woman lifted her head. Her face was pale, too pale, and her eyes were fixed on him with an expression he couldn't define. Fear? Pain? Or something worse? "Ma'am," he repeated, softer. Her lips parted as if she were about to speak. But the wind roared suddenly, and David blinked instinctively against the dust. And she was gone. Not walked away. Not stepped aside. Just gone. The space where she had stood was empty. The grass didn't move. The air fell silent. The sedan looked darker, colder, abandoned for years, not minutes. David spun in place, shining his flashlight wildly. Ditch, grass, road, rear bumper, front of the car. Nothing. No footprints. No sign she had ever been there. The panic hit him all at once, sharp and electric. He backed away, keeping the flashlight raised like a shield. Then he heard it. A faint, hollow knock against the side of his trailer. Once. Twice. 3 times. Slow. Rhythmic. Almost polite. He whipped the flashlight toward the sound, but the beam showed only the long, silver length of the trailer glinting in the night. He didn't check further. He didn't want to. He sprinted back to his cab, slammed the door, locked it, and took off so fast the wheels kicked gravel into the air. His hands were shaking. The windshield seemed darker than before, like the night had thickened around him. He kept checking the mirrors, terrified of seeing something, anything, behind him. But nothing followed. Eventually he reached the outskirts of Wichita Falls. He stopped at the first well-lit gas station he found. He got out, breathing hard, and forced himself to check the truck. Part of him hoped he'd imagine everything. But he hadn't. On the back of the trailer door were 3 small indentations, not like dents from an animal, not like scratches or marks from cargo. More like the shape of knuckles pressing inward from the outside, as if a hand had struck the metal gently, deliberately. David reported what he'd seen to a highway patrol officer inside the station. He didn't expect to be believed. But the officer just sighed deeply and shook his head. "White sedan?" he asked. "Long dress? Middle of the night?" David nodded. The officer rubbed his forehead. "You're not the first trucker to stop for her. That stretch has a reputation. About 5 years ago, a woman died out there. Car stalled, late at night. Another vehicle hit her while she was calling for help. Folks say she still tries to flag down drivers." David tried to explain how she didn't speak, didn't move, and how she simply disappeared. The officer didn't flinch. "Some of them say she wants help. Others say she doesn't know she's gone. And one or two swear she tried to get into their cab. But whatever she wants, no one's ever figured it out." David left the gas station still shaking. He didn't believe in ghosts. Not before that night. He believed in accidents, bad luck, mechanical failure. He believed in tired eyes and hallucinations after long hours on the road. But what he'd seen had been too clear. Too solid. Too real. Hours later, when he finished unloading in Dallas, he checked the video recorder on his dash cam. The footage showed the road, the white sedan, and the woman, standing perfectly still in the emergency lane. But the moment he stepped out of the cab, the camera's view flickered strangely, like something passed directly in front of it. Not a person. Not an animal. More like a cloud of shadow. At the exact moment she vanished from his sight, the camera caught a single frame that shouldn't have been possible. For one split second, behind the truck, directly behind his trailer, stood a woman in a white dress, hair over her face, arms hanging at her sides. But when he froze the frame and zoomed in, he realized something else. Her feet weren't touching the ground. David still drives Highway 287 sometimes, but he no longer stops on that stretch. Not for anyone. Not for any reason. If he sees broken taillights or hazards blinking in the dark, he changes lanes and keeps going. Because he knows some things on the road are real, even if they shouldn't be. And sometimes the dead don't stay where they're supposed to. The end. The Screaming CB Channel. It happened on Interstate 80 in western Nebraska, near the long, empty stretch between North Platte and Ogallala, on a freezing January night in 2021. Long-haul trucker Evan Halper, 39, was hauling construction equipment from Cheyenne to Omaha. It was around 1:15 a.m., the sky pitch black, the plains silent, and snow flurries drifting across the highway like thin white ghosts. Evan had crossed this part of I-80 countless times. It was quiet, flat, open, predictable. But on nights like that one, when fog hovered low over the asphalt and the wind howled across miles of empty fields, even the safest highway felt like a different world. Evan didn't scare easily, but he admitted later that something about that night felt wrong long before anything happened. The CB radio had been hissing with static for miles, even though the weather didn't justify it. The air inside the cab felt too cold, like something was draining the warmth instead of the heater failing. By the time he reached mile marker 168, the road had emptied completely. No headlights behind him. No taillights ahead. Just endless darkness stretching across the frozen plains. That was when the CB channel came alive. First came a faint crackle. Gentle, distant. Nothing unusual. Evan reached for the dial to adjust it. Then a sound sliced through the static. A scream. Not loud. Not echoing. Not distant. A woman's scream, strained and sharp, as if she were inches away from the microphone of a CB unit. It was so sudden that Evan jerked the wheel and drifted onto the rumble strip before correcting. He froze, staring at the radio. The scream repeated, short, broken, like a gasp of raw terror followed by a harsh exhale. Channel 19 wasn't for pranks. No one joked like that out here. Not in the middle of the night. Not in sub-zero weather. And definitely not with a scream that sounded so real it felt like it came from inside the truck. Evan grabbed the mic. Breaker 19, anyone out there? Is someone hurt? No answer. Only static, heavy and wet like breathing. Then the scream came again. Longer this time. trembling. And underneath it, buried deep in the distortion, Evan heard something else. "Help, help me, he's coming." The voice was female, shaking, fading in and out as if the signal were collapsing. Evan's heart pounded. He sat straighter, gripping the wheel with both hands. "Ma'am, I copy," he said, forcing his voice steady. "Where are you? What mile marker? What direction?" "Over." Static swallowed his words. Then, "Please, please, don't let him in." The radio hissed violently, the way it did when lightning struck miles away. But the sky was clear. Evan checked his mirrors. Checked the road. Checked everything. Nothing. Only darkness. He flipped channels, fast, desperate to find a clearer signal. Every channel returned the same static. Nothing else. He returned to 19. And that was when the scream came again, so loud he dropped the mic. But the volume dial hadn't moved. The radio's speakers weren't built to produce sound that loud. It sounded like the scream came from behind him, from the sleeper cabin. Evan twisted around violently, shining his flashlight into the bunk. Nothing. Just blankets. Darkness. Silence. He turned back, breathing hard. The radio crackled, softly this time. The woman's voice returned, but weaker, as if she were whispering through water. "He's outside, don't stop, don't stop." Evan swallowed. His throat was dry. "Who's outside? Are you locked inside your vehicle? I can call highway patrol. Tell me where you are." The radio answered with a long, low moan of static that grew in pitch until it almost resembled a human cry. Then, suddenly, "He's next, too." The transmission cut sharply, like someone had torn out the cable. Silence. Then a single sound filled the cab. Knuckles, dragging slowly across the passenger side window. Evan's head snapped toward the door. The beam of his flashlight trembled across the glass. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But the sound continued, a slow, scraping movement along the outside of the cab, moving from the passenger window toward the back of the sleeper cabin. Like someone dragging their hand along the exterior wall. Deliberate. Slow. Testing. Evan floored the accelerator, pushing the truck past 75, 80, 85 miles per hour. The trailer lurched behind him, tires screaming against the icy road. The sound did not stop. It followed the length of the cab. Then silence. Evan kept driving, white-knuckled, breathing hard, eyes darting to the mirrors. He didn't even realize he was shaking until he tried to grab the mic again. "Breaker 19, this is eastbound on 80 near 168, anyone hear me? Anyone at all?" Only static replied. He drove for another 20 miles, terrified of slowing down even a little. When he reached the next exit and saw lights, real lights, from a truck stop, he nearly cried from relief. He pulled into the lot, parked beneath the brightest lamps, and jumped out immediately, circling the cab with his flashlight. Every surface was covered in frost. Except one. Along the passenger side door was a long smear, as if a hand had dragged across the metal and melted the ice as it passed. Not a handprint. Not exactly. Too long. Too thin. Too sharp. He backed away. Inside the store, he told the clerk, an older man with a weathered face, what had happened. Not everything. Just the radio. Just the screams. The clerk's expression didn't change. "This part of the highway's strange," he said quietly. "You ain't the first to hear it." Evan frowned. "Hear what?" The man nodded toward the radio mounted near the office doorway. "About 11 years ago, a woman broke down around mile 168. Called for help over CB. A trucker tried to reach her. By the time he got there, she was gone. Car doors open. Lights on. Footprints leading toward the fields, then stopping." Evan felt a chill climb his spine. "They ever find her?" he asked. "No. but truckers started hearing her calls afterward. The clerk paused, lowering his voice. Some say she's warning drivers now. Others say she's running from something. Something that's still out there. Evan asked what that meant, but the clerk shook his head and refused to elaborate. Later that morning, after resting in the truck stop parking lot, Evan checked the CB unit himself. No loose wires. No power surges. No malfunction. But when he replayed the recording the radio automatically stored, he heard something that made his stomach drop. The woman's scream had recorded. But so had something else. During the last transmission, sandwiched between the static, there was a second voice. Low. Rumbling. Almost like a growl. Not an animal. Not human either. A voice that whispered something so faint it took him several plays to catch it. I see you. Evan never used his CB radio at night again. He switched to a cell phone, to GPS, to anything that didn't rely on an open channel. And he refused to drive mile 168 after midnight. But sometimes, when the weather turns cold and the air thickens with static, he swears he hears the faintest echo of a woman's voice through the cab. Begging for help. Trying to warn him. Or trying to outrun something that never stopped chasing her. The end. The man running without a face. It happened on Interstate 40, near the Arizona-New Mexico border, on the long, desolate stretch between Holbrook and Gallup, during the early spring of 2020. Long-haul driver Mark Hill, 46, was hauling a load of dry goods from Los Angeles to Oklahoma City. It was a little after 3:10 a.m., the darkest part of the night when the desert turns into a silent, endless void, and even the headlights seemed to fall short of the road ahead. Mark had been awake for nearly 15 hours, but he wasn't the type to hallucinate. He had driven through that desert for more than 20 years. He knew every rest area, every lonely exit, every ridgeline and mesa that rose out of the night like black teeth. He wasn't afraid of the desert. But that morning, something felt wrong before he even realized why. The temperature had dropped fast, much faster than usual. The air inside the cab felt thin, heavy, chilled in a way the heater couldn't touch. The radio was silent. No chatter, no weather reports, no music. Only the low hum of the engine and the whisper of wind against metal. As he reached mile marker 319, the sky looked darker than normal. There were no stars. No moon. Just a heavy, unnatural thickness, like the night itself had weight. Mark adjusted his grip on the steering wheel. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing, trying to shake off the sense that someone was watching him. He chalked it up to fatigue. But deep down he knew it wasn't that. Because shapes began to appear along the sides of the highway. Bushes. Rocks. Shadows. Normal enough. Except they seemed closer than usual, almost like they leaned inward, as if listening to the truck as it passed. At first he ignored it. Then, about 100 yards ahead, something moved across the shoulder. A person. Running. Mark's heart thudded once, hard. A man was sprinting along the right side of the highway, matching the speed of the truck. Mark was going nearly 70 miles per hour, and this man wasn't just keeping up, he was gaining. That wasn't possible. No one could run like that. Mark leaned closer to the windshield, trying to focus through the haze of darkness and dust. The man's stride was unnatural, too long, too fast, almost like the legs weren't bending correctly. He moved in an eerie, rhythmic glide, as if he weren't running but being pulled forward by something unseen. Mark's breath caught. The man wasn't wearing reflective gear. He wasn't holding a flashlight. He wasn't dressed like a jogger or anyone who should be out there at that hour. His clothing looked old, torn, and loosely hanging, something close to a dark jacket and pants, but shredded by wind or time. Mark flicked his high beams on. The light hit the runner. And Mark stabbed the brake pedal with both feet. Because the man had no face. No eyes. No nose. No mouth. Just smooth, pale skin stretched across a head that tilted slightly upward, as if sniffing the cold desert air without lungs or nostrils. The light seemed to bounce off him unnaturally, like it didn't quite land on skin but something more like polished bone. For one frozen second, the faceless man turned his head toward Mark's truck. No eyes, and yet Mark felt the gaze. Like pressure. Like cold fingers pressing into his skull. The truck swerved, tires screaming across the asphalt. Mark fought the wheel, heart pounding wildly, dragging the trailer back into his lane. He tried to accelerate away, but his hands were shaking so badly the truck fishtailed slightly. He risked a glance in the mirror. The man was still there. Running beside the trailer now, keeping pace effortlessly. His movements were jerky, as if joints locked and unlocked at random angles. His arms didn't swing naturally, they jerked in stiff, unnatural lines, like the limbs of a puppet being pulled by invisible wires. Then something else happened. He sped up. Not gradually, instantly. One moment he was beside the trailer, the next he was nearly even with the cab. Mark's breath turned to ice. He didn't dare look directly, but he saw the pale reflection of the faceless head in the corner of his peripheral vision. Then came a sound, a dull, hollow thump. Something struck the side of the cab. Mark jerked the wheel again, almost sending the truck across both lanes. He steadied himself, forcing his eyes forward. Another thump. This time nearer the window. He knew the faceless thing was touching his truck. Running alongside it. Testing it. Mark floored the accelerator, pushing the truck well past its usual limit. The engine roared, the trailer bucked, the headlights shook violently over the rough desert asphalt. Slowly, painfully, the truck began pulling ahead. The faceless man didn't chase. He just stopped. Not slowed, stopped, as if frozen in place. The desert swallowed him instantly, disappearing into the thick blackness. Mark didn't breathe for nearly a minute. He didn't slow down until he reached the bright lights of Gallup, where he pulled into a well-lit gas station. He sat shaking in the cab for nearly 10 minutes before he dared step outside. The night felt normal again. Quiet. Dead. Still. He circled the truck with a flashlight. Nothing was damaged. No dents. No marks. Until he reached the passenger side. There, just below the window, was a long, thin smear, a pale streak, like the outline of 4 elongated fingers. The frost that had formed on the metal around it had melted. The metal felt warmer to the touch than the rest of the truck. Mark backed away quickly, scanning the darkness, expecting the faceless man to appear from behind a pump or from the shadows between trucks. But nothing moved. Inside the station, the clerk noticed Mark's trembling hands and bloodless face. "You okay?" the clerk asked. Mark swallowed hard. "Did you ever hear about someone running out there? On I-40? The clerk's expression darkened. "You mean out past the old ranch land?" Mark nodded. The clerk hesitated, then leaned closer. "There's stories," he said quietly. "Goes back decades. Some folks say a man went missing out there after an accident. Got thrown from his truck. They never found his body. No tracks. No blood. Nothing. Others say something else lives out there. Something that uses the shape of a man but isn't one." Mark didn't reply. He couldn't trust his voice. The clerk continued anyway. "Truckers say that when you see him running, you don't look him in the face. You don't stop. You keep going until you see lights again." Mark nodded shakily. Back inside his truck, he forced himself to check the dash cam. If it had captured anything, he needed to know. The footage was mostly normal, dark road, faint frost, the occasional drifting snow. Then, around 3:12 a.m., the camera shimmered, like heat waves in the desert. A pale blur flickered into view. Something shaped like a man. But as it approached the truck, the camera glitched, skipping 3 seconds of footage entirely. In the next frame, something tall and pale was directly beside the passenger door, blurred into the shape of an elongated figure with a head that had no features. Another skip. Then the cab shook as the thump happened. Then another skip. and the pale smear appeared on the metal. Mark replayed the footage 10 times before he finally shut off the monitor. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't even close the curtain to the sleeper cabin. He sat in the driver's seat, shaking, waiting for dawn. He still drives I-40, but never after midnight. And never alone. If a run forces him onto that stretch in darkness, he waits at a truck stop until the sky turns gray. Because he knows what he saw. And he knows it wasn't human. The desert holds things that don't belong to this world, things that watch, that run, that try to keep up. And one of them has no face. The end. The child on the overpass. It happened on Highway 101 in Northern California, along the fog-drenched stretch between Crescent City and Klamath, in late October of 2018. The nights there were always cold, wet, and heavy with mist, but that night was worse than usual. A deep marine fog had rolled in from the Pacific, thick enough to turn the headlights of every vehicle into white, trembling halos. Long-haul trucker Jonathan Pierce, 44, was returning from a lumber haul to Eugene and heading south toward San Francisco. It was 2:27 a.m., the kind of hour when the world feels abandoned. Jonathan had been driving that route for almost a decade. He respected it. The roads were narrow, twisting, hugging cliffs and forests that swallowed light whole. He knew how people talked about the redwood shadows and strange things seen on the overpasses near the river. He didn't believe any of it. Not until that night. The first sign of trouble came when the fog grew so dense that Jonathan had to slow to 25 miles per hour. The beams from his headlights bounced back at him, disorienting, hazy, almost dreamlike. The forest on both sides turned into a wall of gray and shifting black. The road felt too quiet, no other trucks, no cars, no patrol. Only the monotone hum of the engine and the occasional groan of the brakes. As he approached the long concrete overpass near the Klamath River, something changed. The air grew colder, sharp, almost metallic. The fog wasn't just thick, it was still, unmoving, like the truck had driven into a sealed room. Jonathan rubbed the back of his neck as a strange, instinctive pressure crept across his shoulders. That was when he saw it. Up ahead, through the veil of fog, a small silhouette appeared atop the overpass. Too small to be an adult. Too thin. Too still. A child. Jonathan blinked, leaned forward, blinked again. The shape didn't disappear. It grew clearer as he approached, a child standing perfectly centered on the overpass above the road, motionless, arms resting at the sides, head slightly tilted downward as if watching him approach. Jonathan's stomach clenched. He slowed the truck to a crawl. "What the hell?" he whispered. He flicked his high beams up toward the figure. The child didn't move. The fog behind the silhouette glowed faintly, giving the shape an eerie, backlit outline. Jonathan felt panic rising, but he forced his focus. Children didn't wander onto overpasses at 2 in the morning. Not out here in the middle of the redwoods. Not alone. As the truck rolled closer to the bridge, Jonathan lifted his eyes again, and felt the entire world tilt. The child was gone. 1 second the silhouette stood there. The next, empty concrete. Jonathan slammed the brakes, the truck lurching violently. His breath came in ragged bursts as he stared up at the now empty overpass. There was nowhere the child could have gone. No side walkway, no railing high enough to hide behind. Just open concrete. He exhaled shakily. "That's it," he muttered. "I'm too tired. I'm seeing things." He eased the truck forward again. But as his headlights washed across the next bend, something appeared on the shoulder, a small figure standing just ahead. The child. He was now on the side of the highway, not 20 feet from the truck. Jonathan's heart slammed against his ribs. He hit the air horn instinctively. The blast echoed through the fog, but the child didn't flinch. Jonathan slowed the truck again, staring through the windshield as the shape grew clearer. The child looked around 7 or 8, wearing old-fashioned clothing, a faded jacket, too thin pants, and shoes that looked soaked from the fog. The head hung forward, black hair covering most of the face. Jonathan felt his skin crawl. He grabbed the radio mic. "Dispatch, this is Truck 71 on 101 southbound near Klamath River. I've got a minor on the shoulder. Possible emergency. Please advise." Static answered him. He tried again. Nothing. The child slowly lifted its head. Jonathan froze. The face was pale, impossibly pale, almost luminescent in the headlights. The eyes were dark, hollow, as if bruised or sunken. The lips parted slightly, like the child wanted to speak, but no sound came. Jonathan reached for the door handle, intending to get out and help, but a deep instinct screamed for him not to. He hesitated. His hand stopped inches from the latch. Then the child smiled. Not an innocent smile. Not a frightened smile. A slow, unnatural stretch of the lips that didn't match the sadness in the eyes. Jonathan's breath hitched. He forced himself to call out through the rolled-down window. "Hey! Are you okay? Do you need help?" The smile faded instantly, replaced by a slack, emotionless stare. Then the child took a single slow step forward. Jonathan gripped the steering wheel. Another step. The fog swirled strangely around the small figure's legs, almost as if it were being drawn inward. Then the child's head twitched sharply to the side, like something invisible had grabbed the chin and yanked it. Jonathan jolted. The child took another step, and then another, but the movements became jerky, broken, wrong. Jonathan instinctively backed up the truck. That was when he noticed something else. There were wet footprints on the asphalt behind the child, leading from the exact direction of the overpass. Small, bare, and disappearing in the fog. Jonathan felt an icy shiver crawl up his spine. Something was very wrong. "Get in the truck," he whispered to himself. "Just go. Just go." He shifted into gear. The child suddenly appeared beside the cab window. Jonathan screamed. He hadn't seen the child move. One moment it was 10 feet away, the next it was standing flush against the door, its face level with the window, staring in at him. Its eyes weren't just dark, they looked bottomless, absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. Jonathan pressed the accelerator, sending the truck lunging forward. But he couldn't help glancing in the mirror. The child stood perfectly still on the asphalt, watching him leave, head slowly tilting to the side until it reached an unnatural angle. Jonathan drove until lights appeared, the bright glare of a small gas station near Klamath. He pulled in, shaking violently, and stumbled out of the cab. He circled the truck with his flashlight. Nothing. But when he reached the passenger side, he saw them. Small footprints. Wet. Bare. Leading halfway up the side step of the door, as if something had tried to climb inside. Jonathan backed away, heart thudding violently. Inside the station, he asked the attendant, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, whether she knew anything about children wandering near the overpass. Her expression dimmed immediately. "You saw him," she said softly, not questioning him at all. Jonathan swallowed hard. "What do you mean, him?" The attendant leaned on the counter, voice low and steady. "Years back, a school bus crashed on that overpass. Fog, bad timing, bad brakes. A few kids didn't make it. They say one of them, the youngest, still walks that stretch. Lost. Looking for someone. Maybe looking for the driver he never saw in time." Jonathan stared. "Why did he get so close to me?" The attendant shook her head. "No one knows why he picks certain drivers. But everyone who sees him says he follows them for a bit. Like he's trying to figure something out. Maybe trying to go home. Maybe trying to warn people. Or maybe he just doesn't know he's gone." Jonathan left the station shaken to the core. He checked his dash cam footage once he reached a rest stop with stable Wi-Fi. Most of it was fog and darkness. But at the exact moment he saw the child on the shoulder, the camera flickered, and one frame, just one, captured the silhouette standing beside the cab. The face was a blur. But the eyes were not. They were two dark pits, absorbing every bit of light around them. Jonathan never drove that section at night again. If a delivery forced him near the overpass, he waited for dawn no matter how late it made him. Because he had seen the child. And something deep inside him knew that child had seen him too. The end. The truck behind me. It happened on Interstate 70 in eastern Colorado, on the long, flat stretch between Limon and Burlington, during a bitterly cold night in February 2022. The plains were frozen solid, the wind screamed endlessly across empty fields, and the temperature had dropped below zero. Long-haul driver Daniel Reeve, 51, was hauling frozen meats from Denver to Kansas City. It was 1:48 a.m., a time when even the truck stops felt abandoned and the horizon looked like a black, endless wall. Daniel wasn't new to night driving. He preferred it: fewer cars, less noise, straighter roads. But that night, as he crossed the empty plains, the darkness felt different. Too thick. Too heavy. The sky above was moonless, starless, like a lid closing over the world. His truck's headlights disappeared into the black without reaching anything. Even the reflective posts along the highway seemed swallowed whole. By the time he passed mile marker 365, Daniel felt something that made him tighten his grip on the wheel, a faint vibration along the metal of the cab. He thought it was wind, but the gusts were steady, while this vibration pulsed, irregular and faint. Then he saw them. Headlights. Two bright beams appeared in his rearview mirror, far back at first, then slowly growing. Relief washed over him. Another truck on the road meant he wasn't alone in the dark. He even felt grateful: a second pair of eyes made the highway safer. But something felt off almost immediately. The headlights didn't bounce or shift with the bumps of the road. They stayed perfectly level, perfectly steady. No sway, no movement, no slight drift left or right. They looked fixed. As though mounted on something that never moved at all. Daniel frowned and checked his speed. He was doing 68 miles per hour, steady. The truck behind him was doing exactly the same. After several minutes, he realized the distance between them hadn't changed. The other truck remained exactly 40 or 50 feet behind him, holding perfect pace. Too perfect. Daniel's pulse quickened. He switched lanes to see if the truck would pass. It switched lanes with him. Instantly. Perfectly. His stomach dropped. He returned to his lane. The headlights followed. "All right, that's weird," he muttered under his breath. He grabbed the CB radio. "Westbound on 70, near 360, anyone out there? Got a truck behind me riding too close." Only static replied. He tried again. Nothing. The other truck didn't respond. Its headlights didn't flash. It didn't slow down. It didn't speed up. It just stayed behind him, unwavering. Daniel's skin prickled. Whoever it was, they were driving with unnatural precision. The plains around him grew darker as wind swept dust across the road. The sky seemed lower. The silence inside the cab grew thick, broken only by the hum of the engine and Daniel's increasingly fast breathing. He glanced in the mirror again. Still there. Still perfectly centered. Still too close. He grabbed his phone and flipped to his rearview camera feed, a new system installed only months earlier. It showed a grainy, black and white view of the rear bumper and the road behind his trailer. Daniel tilted the screen toward himself. There were no headlights in the image. The road behind him was empty. His chest tightened. He looked back into the mirror. The headlights were still there. He stared at the screen again. Nothing. Two different realities, one he could see with his eyes, and one the camera insisted was true. His breath fogged inside the cab. Daniel whispered, "It's not possible." The headlights grew brighter. Closer. Daniel slammed the accelerator. The truck roared forward, engine straining as the speed crept into the mid-70s. The trailer rattled in the wind. But the headlights did not fall back. They followed him. Perfectly. He pushed harder. 76. 77. 78 miles per hour. Still there. Still the exact same distance. Still perfectly aligned. Daniel's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He flipped on his hazard lights to warn the driver. The headlights behind him flickered in response, not a blink, not a flash, but a strange, slow dimming as though someone were turning a dial. They dimmed until they were only faint glows. Then, slowly, intentionally, they brightened again. Daniel let out a shaky breath. Something was toying with him. As he reached a slight incline in the highway, Daniel watched the headlights react instantly, adjusting their brightness in a way no normal headlights did. They didn't angle downward or upward with the slope. They stayed level, fixed, unnatural, wrong. The vibration along the cab returned. Tap, tap, tap. Like something brushing against the trailer walls. Daniel grabbed the steering wheel tightly and forced himself to focus on the road. He couldn't stop. Not out here. No lights, no gas stations, no help for miles. But when he checked the mirror again, the headlights were gone. He blinked. Leaned forward. Gone. The rearview camera still showed empty road. But the headlights in the mirror had vanished like someone had flipped a switch. Daniel exhaled slowly, wiping sweat from his forehead. Thank God. Then his phone screen flickered. The rearview camera feed popped. A white static frame jumped onto the screen for a split second, and in that frozen image, a massive silhouette stood directly behind his trailer. Tall. Human-shaped. Leaning forward as though looking into the camera lens. Daniel dropped the phone. He stomped the accelerator again, pushing the truck as fast as he safely could down the empty stretch. His hands trembled uncontrollably, and the road began to blur. The rear of the cab thumped loudly, once, twice, 3 times. Daniel shouted and sped toward the next exit, praying for lights, signs, anything. The tapping grew louder, faster, as if whatever was behind him was now hitting the trailer with increasing force. Finally, blessedly, the glow of a gas station appeared on the horizon. He swerved into the exit lane, tires screaming, the trailer wobbling dangerously. As he rolled into the bright lights, every noise, every tap, every thump, stopped instantly. Daniel parked under the brightest spot near the pumps, climbed out, and circled the truck with shaky hands holding a flashlight. At first, nothing looked wrong. Then he saw them. Handprints. Large ones. Smeared across the back of the trailer, long streaks as if someone had dragged their hands across the metal while running behind the truck at high speed. The prints were dark, almost black, slightly oily, and unlike any dirt Daniel had ever seen on the road. He backed away slowly. Inside the station, he approached the attendant, a thin older man with bright, wary eyes. There was a truck, Daniel said, voice breaking. Following me. Too close. It wasn't in the camera. And then. The attendant didn't let him finish. You saw it, he said quietly. Daniel stared. What? The man scratched his chin. That stretch of I-70? Lot of drivers see lights behind them. Truck that isn't there. Some say it's a wreck from years ago, a trucker who jackknifed during a blizzard. Others say something worse roams those plains. Something that picks a truck and follows it until it reaches light again. Daniel swallowed hard. What does it want? The attendant looked at him with a mixture of pity and fear. No one knows. But whatever it is, it doesn't like the dark. It lives in it. Moves through it. Follows those who drive alone too long. Daniel left the station shaking. When he replayed the dash cam footage later, he found only one moment of disturbance, a single frame of static, buried between minutes of clear footage. In that frame, staring directly into the camera, was a pale, distorted face pressed close to the lens, mouth stretched into a thin line, eyes too bright for human reflection. Daniel no longer drives that stretch of I-70 without a partner. He waits until sunrise if he has to. He avoids the plains at night, even if it means losing hours of time. Because he knows what followed him. And he knows it wasn't a truck. The knock on the sleeper cabin. It happened on Interstate 15 in southern Utah, on the barren stretch between Beaver and Cedar City, during a dry, moonless night in July 2021. The desert air was hot even after midnight, the sky cloudless, and the landscape so empty it felt like the world had been carved out and left unfinished. Long-haul trucker Samuel Sam Carter, 43, was hauling electronics from Salt Lake City to Las Vegas. It was 12:54 a.m., the kind of hour when sound travels strangely far and even the hum of an engine feels too loud. Sam wasn't superstitious. He had driven for 23 years, slept in his sleeper cabin thousands of nights, and never once felt afraid of the dark. But something about that stretch of I-15 always unsettled him. The land felt wrong, too open, too silent, too empty. The locals called it the Hollow, a place where sound didn't echo but disappeared. The air felt thick with static, as if the desert were holding its breath. By the time he passed mile marker 92, he felt exhaustion weighing on him. His eyelids burned, his hands trembled slightly, and the road ahead blurred at the edges. He sighed heavily and decided to pull into a small gravel pullout he'd used before, an unofficial rest area with no lights, no cameras, no traffic. Just darkness and the distant whisper of wind scraping across sand. He parked the truck, turned off the engine, and let the silence settle. It was thick, heavy, suffocating. Not even insects chirped. The desert stretched into infinite darkness in all directions. Sam climbed into the sleeper cabin, drew the curtain, and let himself collapse onto the mattress. The quiet pressed around him like a blanket. His breathing slowed. His muscles loosened. He drifted toward sleep. Then it happened. A soft knock on the outside wall of the sleeper cabin. 3 taps. Slow. Deliberate. Sam's eyes snapped open. He froze, listening. His heart began pounding hard in his chest. Maybe it was wind. Maybe a branch. Maybe a small rock kicked by the cooling engine. He lay still, waiting. Nothing. Just dead, heavy silence. He exhaled shakily and closed his eyes again. Seconds later, the knock came again. 3 taps. The exact same rhythm. Sam sat up slowly, the mattress creaking under him. His breathing quickened. He grabbed a flashlight, crawled to the curtain, and pulled it aside. The cab was empty. The windows dark. The mirrors reflected nothing but void. He unlocked the door quietly and slipped out into the hot desert air. The silence was worse out there, almost pressurized. He walked around the truck with the flashlight trembling in his hand. Nothing. No animals. No people. No marks. No tracks in the dust. The desert was completely still. Sam swallowed hard and forced himself back inside. He locked the door, double-checked it, and returned to the bunk. His nerves buzzed, but exhaustion eventually smothered them, pulling him back toward sleep. Minutes passed. His breath steadied. Then... knock. 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 Sam jolted upright, hitting his head on the ceiling. This time the sound came from the other side of the sleeper cabin. Not the wall he'd just checked, the opposite one. Someone, or something, had moved. He grabbed the flashlight again but didn't leave the cab this time. Instead, he sat perfectly still, listening. The knocking stopped. Then came a new sound. A dragging noise. Soft. Slow. Like fingertips gliding across metal. The noise traveled along the outer wall of the sleeper cabin, moving from one corner to the other. Sam held his breath as the sound circled the truck. The hairs on his arms stood up. He looked at the driver's side window. Nothing. Then the passenger side. Nothing. But the sound continued. Tracing the truck. Following him. Sam whispered under his breath, "This isn't real. I'm tired, just tired." He forced himself to lie back down. He covered his face with his forearm, willing sleep to take him. Silence returned. Deep, crushing silence. And then the knocks came again. But from the inside of the sleeper cabin. 3 taps. On the wall behind him. Sam leapt off the mattress so fast he nearly fell. He scrambled to the front seat, ripping the curtain open and breathing hard. The cabin was empty. The dashboard dimly glowed. The mirrors showed nothing. But the knocks had come from inside the wall. He sat in the driver's seat for nearly half an hour, too afraid to move. The desert stayed quiet. The world stayed dark. Finally, he forced himself to calm down. Maybe metal contracted from the heat. Maybe the trailer was settling. He repeated these thoughts until they almost felt true. Almost. He climbed back into the sleeper slowly, like a man stepping into deep water. He lay still, eyes open, watching the faint outline of the ceiling. Minutes passed. Then an entirely different sound echoed through the cab. A whisper. Not a voice exactly, more like air being pushed through teeth. It drifted from the corner of the sleeper cabin. Faint. Faint enough that Sam questioned if it was real. Then it came again. Closer. A breathy, drawn-out sound. Not words. Not language. Just presence. Sam reached for the flashlight with trembling fingers. Before he could turn it on, a shape pressed against the thin wall of the sleeper cabin from the outside, a hand. A small hand. The outline of long, thin fingers appeared against the fabric of the interior wall, pressing from the other side. The hand dragged slowly downward, leaving the faintest indentation as it moved. Sam screamed. He threw himself into the driver's seat, started the engine, and tore out of the pullout, gravel and dust exploding beneath the tires. He didn't look back. He didn't slow down. He didn't even breathe properly for nearly 2 miles. Only when his speed dropped below 70 did he glance in the mirror. There was nothing behind him. The desert was empty once more. Hours later, when he reached a busy rest stop near St. George, he parked under bright lights, got out with shaking legs, and walked around the truck. On the wall of the sleeper cabin, right where the handprint had appeared inside, were 3 shallow indentations in the metal shell. Not scratches. Not dents. Indentations. Like something had pressed fingertips inward with tremendous strength. Sam staggered back, heart pounding. Inside the rest stop, he found another trucker who knew the area well, an older Navajo man named Patrick. Sam told him what happened. Not everything, but enough. Patrick's face hardened. "You stopped in the hollow," he said. "That place is wrong. It's been wrong since before the road existed." Sam swallowed. "What's in there?" Patrick shook his head slowly. "Not a person. Not an animal. Something old. Something that follows travelers who sleep out there." His voice dropped even lower. "When it knocks, it's not asking to come in. It's checking if someone's inside." Sam felt his stomach twist. Patrick continued, "You're lucky. Most people who hear it the first time don't wake up for the second knock." Sam didn't sleep the rest of the night. He sat under the bright gas station lights until dawn, staring at the indentations on the metal like they were wounds. When he checked his dash cam later, he found only a brief moment of recorded interference, a flicker across the video around 1:13 a.m. The flicker formed the outline of a face pressed against the sleeper cabin window. The eyes were hollow. The mouth was open. And behind it, something darker moved, as if melting into the night. Sam never again slept on the side of an isolated highway. If he couldn't find a well-lit rest stop, he kept driving. Exhaustion was safer than stopping. Because he knew what knocked on his truck. And he knew it would knock again if he ever parked in the hollow. The end. The highway that loops back. It happened on Highway 50 in central Nevada, on the infamous desolate stretch known as the loneliest road in America, between Ely and Fallon, during a cold, windless night in November 2020. The desert sky was black and perfectly clear, but the road looked like an endless ribbon of asphalt disappearing into a void. Long-haul trucker Robert Rob Langdon, 48, was transporting industrial equipment from Reno to Denver. It was 2:03 a.m., and the highway was so empty that Rob hadn't seen another vehicle in more than an hour. The silence was unnerving. Even the CB radio was dead. No static. No chatter. No weather alerts. Just pure, heavy silence that pressed against the cab like a physical weight. Rob rolled down his window to check the air. No wind, no animal sounds, no insects. Only the deep emptiness of the Nevada desert stretching in every direction. Rob wasn't new to isolation. He had driven through Wyoming blizzards, Texas dust storms, and the pitch-black coal roads of West Virginia. Nothing scared him. But that night, something felt wrong, and he felt it long before anything actually happened. The darkness felt too dense, too still, too complete. By the time he reached mile marker 287, he realized something strange. The air inside the cab smelled faintly of cold soil, like freshly dug earth. A smell that didn't belong to the desert. He checked the vents, thinking maybe dust had blown in, but they were clear. Then the headlights flickered. Just once. A dim pulse of light across the dash. Rob frowned. His equipment was new, installed only months earlier. He tapped the panel, checking for loose wires. Everything looked fine. As he returned his eyes to the road, something far ahead caught his attention. A gas station. An old, lonely one, single building, one flickering pump light, and a faded sign he couldn't read from afar. He didn't plan to stop, but he felt a wave of relief anyway. Any sign of civilization at that hour was comforting. He drove past it without slowing. And for a moment, everything seemed normal again. But 20 minutes later, Rob saw something that made his blood run cold. Another gas station. Identical to the first. Same cracked canopy. Same bent metal light. Same half-collapsed sign. For a moment Rob thought he had dozed off or mistaken one station for another. But he knew this road. There were no stations in that part of the desert, none for nearly 150 miles. He stared at the building as it passed by his window. It was the exact same station. His chest tightened. He checked the GPS. The screen displayed something he had never seen. No data. The map was blank except for a single unmoving arrow. Rob swallowed hard, knuckles whitening around the wheel. He drove on, forcing himself to focus. 15 minutes later, his headlights revealed something that made him stop breathing. The same gas station. Same lights. Same angle. Same everything. He slowed the truck to 20 miles per hour, staring at it as he passed. The pump nozzle lay on the ground in the same spot as before. A crooked sign hung in the same position. The single flickering light blinked in the same pattern. Jesus Christ, he whispered. He accelerated, heart pounding, desperate to get away from that stretch of road. The desert around him blurred into streaks of black and silver. But the road didn't change. Nothing changed. No turns. No hills. No markers. Just endless asphalt and the faint shimmer of heat on the horizon. 10 minutes later, the gas station appeared again. Rob slammed the brakes this time, tires shrieking across the empty road. He sat there shaking, staring at the building illuminated in his headlights. The desert wind finally picked up, brushing against the cab, carrying a low, distant hum like faint whispering. He grabbed the CB radio. Breaker 19, this is westbound on Highway 50. Is anyone out there? Anyone reading this? Silence. Then static. Then something else, a faint sound buried beneath the static. A whisper. Don't stop. Rob froze. He pressed the transmit button again. This is truck 493. I'm stuck on a loop or something. I keep passing the same station. Anyone reading this? Please respond. The whisper came again. Closer. Clearer. Don't, get out. Rob's pulse hammered in his ears. He slammed the truck back into gear and sped past the station again. This time, as he passed, he noticed something new, a figure standing at the edge of the building's shadow. Not moving. Not waving. Just standing. Tall. Thin. And completely still. He didn't dare slow down. The darkness swallowed the station behind him. For the next half hour, he drove faster than he ever had through the desert. The truck rattled violently against the uneven road. The trailer groaned. His hands ached from gripping the wheel. But then... no. It couldn't be. The station appeared again. The figure was closer now. Standing beside the pump. Facing the road. Rob's breath hitched so hard he choked. He refused to stop. He refused to blink. He kept driving. Minutes later, the road began to vibrate underneath him. The asphalt turned rough, cracked, uneven. A strange static electricity filled the air, making the hair on his arms stand upright. He glanced at the GPS. Still blank. Then the CB radio crackled again. A voice, deeper now, masculine, something he felt rather than heard. "You're still here." Rob's throat clenched. "Who is this?" he shouted. "What the hell is happening?" The voice didn't answer directly. Instead, it said, "You should have kept going the first time." Rob's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" Silence. Then, "You can still leave. If you pass without looking." Rob didn't understand. But he didn't have time to. The gas station appeared again. But now, the entire building was dark. The flickering light had gone out. The pumps lay scattered as if ripped from the ground. And the figure standing beside it was so close to the road that Rob could see its outline in his headlights. Tall. Thin. 2 long arms. Head tilted backward as if staring at the sky. Rob gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned bone white. He kept his eyes straight on the road ahead. "Don't look," he whispered to himself. "Don't look at it. Don't look." As he passed, he felt something cold press against the side window. Not tapping. Pressing. Like a hand. He didn't look. He didn't blink. He kept his eyes on the road. Suddenly, the darkness broke. Lights, real lights, appeared on the horizon. A rest stop. A modern one. Bright. Crowded. Loud. Alive. Rob burst into tears as he pulled off the highway, shaking so violently he could barely put the truck in park. He ran inside the convenience store, breathing like he had sprinted miles. The clerk stared at him wide-eyed. "You okay, man?" he asked. Rob swallowed hard. Is there a gas station before this? Back on 50? About an hour?" The clerk's face changed slowly, confusion sliding into concern. "No," he said. "There's nothing out there. Not for almost 80 miles. Rob's skin turned ice cold. He went back to his truck at dawn, when sunlight finally reached the desert. He circled the vehicle. Everything was normal. Except one thing. On the passenger side door, smeared across the dust, was a long streak, a thick, pale drag mark, like a massive hand had brushed along the metal. When he checked the dash cam footage, he found something even worse. Every time the gas station appeared, the camera glitched, freezing on the same single frame. A figure standing beside the pump. Staring directly at the truck. Closer each time. Rob never drove Highway 50 at night again. He waited for daylight no matter how late he was, no matter the cost. Because he knew he had escaped something. Something that didn't want him to leave. The end. The last radio call. It happened on Interstate 10 in western Texas, on the barren stretch between Van Horn and Fort Stockton, during a windless, starless night in August 2021. The desert air was dry enough to crack lips, and the sky looked like a single sheet of black cloth stretched tight over the world. Long-haul driver Michael McHarland, 45, was hauling tires from Los Angeles to San Antonio. It was 3:11 a.m., the hour when even the desert animals hide, and the road feels like a tunnel carved through pure darkness. Mick wasn't alone on that stretch of I-10 in his memories. He had a friend out there, Caleb Morris, another trucker, a man he'd shared hundreds of miles and thousands of conversations with. 3 years earlier, Caleb had vanished on this exact highway. One moment he'd been on the radio, complaining about battery lights flickering, the next, his voice had been swallowed by static. They found his burned-out truck days later near Sierra Blanca. But they never found him. Mick still thought about him. Still pictured his laugh. Still replayed that final conversation in his head. By the time he passed mile marker 210, the loneliness pressed against him like a physical weight. The CB radio was silent. No truckers. No chatter. No weather warnings. Just a low hum, like the radio was holding its breath. He rubbed his eyes, took a long drink of cold coffee, and sat up straighter in his seat. Exhaustion gnawed at him, but something else did too, a growing sense of pressure, like the darkness outside was shifting closer. Then the CB radio clicked. Once. Sharp. Sudden. Mick's heart stopped for half a beat. He stared at the radio. It crackled again. Then a voice came through, faint, broken, swallowed by static. "Ick, you, copy." Mick froze. He knew that voice. It was impossible, but he knew it. "Caleb," he whispered. Silence. Then, "Mick, don't, slow down." The voice wasn't just familiar. It was identical, tone, inflection, the slight rasp from years of smoking. Mick's blood went cold. His hands trembled. "This isn't funny," he said into the mic. "Who is this? Identify yourself." Static swallowed the reply, but words pushed through like someone drowning, trying to yell underwater. "Not alone, not behind you." Mick's eyes darted to the mirrors. Nothing. Only empty asphalt stretching behind him into darkness. "Caleb, if this is a recording, I swear to." "Mick." The way the voice said his name made his stomach twist. "Mick, don't get off the road." Then the radio died, a sharp, electrical snap like a fuse blowing. The dashboard lights flickered. The air inside the cab shifted, becoming heavy, metallic. Mick felt the hairs on his arms rise. He checked the mirrors again. Still nothing. He pressed the accelerator. The engine growled louder as the truck surged forward. For 5 long minutes, nothing happened. Then something thumped the back of the trailer. Once. Hard. The truck shook. Mick's breath left him in a sharp gasp. He checked the mirrors again. He saw something this time. Far behind him. A faint shape on the road. A black silhouette. Human-shaped. Standing in the center of the lane. Facing him. He blinked hard. The shape vanished. "No, no, no," Mick muttered. The radio crackled again. "Mick, keep going." Mick grabbed the mic with a shaking hand. "Caleb, where are you? What's happening?" The reply dragged through the speaker, distorted by distance or something far worse. "Didn't burn. Mick, didn't die, something came first." Mick's chest tightened. "What came first? Caleb, what came first?" Static hissed. Then a single whispered word. "Him." The dashboard lights dimmed. The engine stuttered for half a second. Mick felt ice crawl down his spine. Behind him, something thumped the trailer again. Then again. Faster. Harder. Like fists pounding metal. "No!" Mick shouted, slamming the accelerator. The speed climbed. The desert blurred. The thumping turned into scraping, long, slow drags along the trailer walls, like fingernails or claws. The metal whined under the pressure. Mick's breath shuddered. "Caleb, what is he?" The radio responded, barely audible. "Don't look." Mick forced his eyes on the road, knuckles white on the wheel. but a shadow flickered in the mirror. Something tall. Something bending wrong. Something clinging to the back of the trailer. He didn't look. He couldn't. The road curvature changed ahead, a long, sweeping bend. As the trailer shifted weight, the scraping turned into a shriek across metal. Then something slammed into the passenger side of the cab. Mick screamed and fought to keep control. The truck fishtailed. The headlights shook violently. Another slam. Something hit the driver's side door, hard enough to rattle the bolts. Mick refused to look. Refused to check the mirrors. Refused to acknowledge the cold breath he felt creeping along the back of his neck. He floored it. The truck roared down the highway. Lights appeared ahead, the bright glow of a truck stop near Fort Stockton. Mick's entire body shook as he tore off the highway and into the lot. He parked violently, engine idling, and stumbled out before the truck had fully settled. His legs nearly buckled. He circled the trailer with a flashlight. Every inch of metal was covered in deep, gouging scratches, long, jagged marks running horizontally along the walls, down the doors, even across the bumper. Some scratches dug so deep he could see silver beneath the paint. Then he saw the back door. For long, parallel gashes ran down the center, perfectly even, like massive fingers had clawed their way across. Mick backed away, shaking violently. Inside the station, he asked the clerk, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes, if anyone had ever talked about voices on the radio. The man's expression darkened immediately. "You heard him," he said quietly. Mick froze. "Who?" "Your friend," the clerk replied. "The one who disappeared out here." Mick felt tears sting his eyes. "How do you know about that?" "Truckers talk," the man said. "Some say your friend tried to warn someone before he vanished. Others say he's still out here, stuck between this world and whatever took him." Mick's lip trembled. "And what took him?" The clerk shook his head. "No one knows. We only know what the drivers say. They hear footsteps on the trailer. Scratching. Something climbing. And sometimes, if they're lucky." He glanced at Mick. "They hear a voice telling them to run." Mick left the station numb. When he reviewed his dash cam the next day, most of the footage was normal. But at 3:12 a.m., the video glitched, freezing on a single frame. A figure stood on the back bumper of his truck. Tall. Human-shaped. Skin stretched too tight. Head bent backward at an impossible angle. And behind it, barely visible, stood a second figure. Shorter. Smaller. Wearing clothes identical to what Caleb had worn the day he disappeared. Mick never used his CB radio at night again. He never drove that stretch of I-10 alone. And he never forgot the final words that came through the speaker. 3 soft, broken words. "Don't stop, Mick." The end. The hitchhiker with the red jacket. It happened on Highway 2 in northern Montana, along the isolated stretch between Libby and Kalispell, during a fog-choked night in October 2019. The mountains rose like black walls on both sides, and the forest pressed in close enough that tree branches looked like skeletal arms reaching toward the headlights. Long-haul trucker Ethan Ward, 41, was hauling machine parts from Spokane to Minot. It was 1:42 a.m., the type of hour when the highway becomes a narrow ribbon suspended in darkness, and the silence grows so thick it feels alive. Ethan had driven Highway 2 hundreds of times. It was lonely but predictable. Moose, deer, the occasional stranded traveler, nothing he couldn't handle. But that night, from the moment he entered the Kootenai National Forest area, a strange heaviness settled over the road. The mist crawled low across the asphalt like a living thing, clinging to the wheels, rising in swirling tendrils. His headlights flickered twice. Then the radio cut out completely. Ethan felt a cold prickling along his shoulders. He slowed slightly, leaning forward in his seat. Around mile marker 93, something appeared at the edge of his headlights. A man. Standing on the shoulder. Facing the road. Wearing a bright red jacket. Ethan's chest tightened with instinctive alarm. Hitchhikers at 2 in the morning on that stretch were almost unheard of. The forests were too dense. The wildlife too dangerous. And the nearest town was 30 miles away. As the truck approached, the man raised one hand. Not waving. Not signaling. Just lifting it, palm outward, like he wanted Ethan to stop. Against his better judgment, Ethan did. He brought the truck to a slow halt about 20 yards ahead. The man walked toward the passenger side. His steps were slow, almost gliding. The red jacket glowed faintly in the headlights, but the rest of him seemed swallowed by the night. His head was lowered, hair hanging forward in dark, wet strands. Ethan rolled the window down 2 inches. "You all right, buddy?" he called out. "You need help?" The man stopped beside the door. He didn't answer. He didn't lift his head. He just stood there, breathing softly, slow, even breaths that fogged the lower part of the glass. Ethan swallowed hard. "You stranded? Need a ride to town?" Still nothing. The man's hand twitched. Just once. Then he lifted his head. The face that stared back at Ethan made his stomach twist. The man's skin was pale and bluish, like he had been walking in the cold for days. His eyes were unfocused, glassy, as if he were staring past Ethan instead of at him. His lips were slightly parted. But the worst part was the expression. Empty. Completely empty. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to drive away, but the man's lips moved. Barely. He whispered something Ethan couldn't hear. "What?" Ethan asked. "Speak up, man." The whisper came again, just audible through the crack in the window. "Open the door." Ethan recoiled instinctively. "Not happening," he said sharply. "If you need help, I can call." The man pressed his hand flat against the window. Ethan flinched. The palm was cold. Not the cold of night air, a deeper cold, like something pulled from a freezer. Frost spread outward from the man's hand in delicate spiderweb patterns across the glass. Ethan threw the truck into gear. "Okay, nope. We're done." The man leaned closer, his breath fogging the glass again. "Open the door." His voice was wrong now. Less human. More like wind forcing its way through a cracked window frame. Ethan floored the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, gravel spraying behind him. He checked the mirror. The man stood perfectly still. Watching. The red jacket bright as fresh blood in the fog. Ethan exhaled shakily, trying to steady his pulse. He drove another mile before his breathing slowed. Then his passenger side mirror shifted. Only slightly. As if something had brushed the side of the cab. Ethan forced himself not to look. But curiosity, or fear, got the better of him. He glanced. And his throat closed. The man in the red jacket was now running beside the truck. Not sprinting. Not jogging. Gliding. His feet barely touched the ground, legs moving too fast, too smoothly, like he was being pulled forward rather than running on his own. His head was turned toward Ethan, that same empty-eyed stare locked onto him. Ethan's grip tightened until his knuckles turned white. "No, no, no." He pushed the truck harder. 60. 65. 70. The man kept pace. He didn't even look like he was breathing hard. Then he raised his hand and knocked on the passenger door. A soft, deliberate knock. Once. Twice. 3 times. Ethan nearly screamed. The man's face pressed against the window, the skin flattening unnaturally as if soft, pliable, wrong. His mouth moved again, and Ethan heard the whisper through the metal and glass. "Let me in." Ethan swerved violently, trying to shake him off. For a moment, the man disappeared. Ethan looked around frantically. The mirrors showed nothing. The fog swallowed the road. Then something thumped on the roof. Ethan gasped. Another thump. Heavy. Slow. Walking. Something was walking across the top of the cab. The metal dipped slightly with each step. He floored the accelerator again, pushing the truck to 80. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Ethan didn't dare breathe. Then the radio crackled. A deep, distorted voice whispered through the static. "Don't stop." Ethan froze. The voice wasn't Caleb's, or any human voice. It sounded layered, echoing, almost like multiple whispers speaking at once. The footsteps resumed. Right above his head. Ethan swerved the truck again. The footsteps slid, a momentary scrape of something heavy losing balance, and then silence. Ethan didn't check the mirrors. He didn't slow down. He didn't blink. He drove until the lights of Kalispell appeared like salvation in the dark. He pulled into the first gas station he saw, slammed the brakes, jumped out of the truck, and backed away from it like it was on fire. When he circled the cab with a flashlight, he saw it. On the passenger door, the same one the man had touched, was a handprint. Black. Wet. Burned into the frost like a brand. And on the roof, near the edge, were long streaks, drag marks, as if something had slid off the top of the truck. Inside the station, Ethan found a local deputy grabbing coffee. He approached him, voice shaking. Do people hitchhike out here?" The deputy turned slowly. "You didn't pick up anyone in a red jacket, did you?" Ethan's blood froze. "No," he whispered. "But I saw him." The deputy nodded grimly. "Then you're lucky. Some folks pick him up. They don't make it far." Ethan swallowed. "What, is he?" The deputy rubbed his forehead. "Years ago, a man hitchhiked this road. Red jacket, same spot every time. Drivers stopped for him. He got in. And then, no one saw those drivers again. Their trucks were found empty miles down the road. Doors wide open. Engines still running. Like they walked away in the middle of the night and never came back." Ethan felt the room spin. "Did they ever find the hitchhiker's body?" he asked. The deputy shook his head. "No. But some say he still walks that stretch, looking for someone to take him home." He paused. "And he gets angry when drivers don't let him in." Ethan didn't sleep that night. When he checked the dash cam footage the next morning, everything looked normal until 1:45 a.m. Then the video glitched. One frame showed the man in the red jacket standing directly beside the cab, his face pressed against the passenger window. The next showed him on the roof, hunched like an animal. The final corrupted frame captured him standing in the middle of the road behind the truck, head tilted, watching Ethan drive away. He didn't blink. He didn't move. He just stared. Ethan never drove that stretch of Highway 2 again after sunset. If a job forced him through Montana, he waited for daylight, no matter the cost, no matter the deadline. Because he knew what he saw. And he knew the man in the red jacket was still out there. Waiting for the next driver to stop. The end. The unmarked exit. It happened on Interstate 55 in rural Mississippi, on the lonely, swamp-bordered stretch between Macomb and Brookhaven, during a humid, moonless night in June 2020. The air was thick enough to taste, heavy with the smell of wet earth and stagnant water. Long-haul trucker Henry Dalton, 52, was hauling packaged foods from Baton Rouge to Memphis. It was 2:18 a.m., and the entire world around him seemed swallowed in darkness so complete it felt unnatural. Henry had driven this route for nearly 20 years. He knew every exit, every truck stop, every mile marker. So when he reached mile marker 23 and saw an exit ramp that shouldn't exist, his pulse tightened immediately. There was no signage. No lights. Just a narrow strip of asphalt veering off into the trees. Henry slowed the truck slightly, squinting through the windshield. The ramp looked old, cracked, as if it had been built decades earlier and forgotten. A faint mist clung to it, swirling like living smoke. He checked the GPS. The screen glowed blank. No road. No exit. No data. His chest tightened. He blinked hard and kept going, until something happened that made his breath stop. A woman stepped out from the trees beside the exit ramp. Just stepped out. Into the beam of his headlights. Like she'd been waiting. She had long black hair, soaked and clinging to her clothes. Her dress looked torn, muddy, and old-fashioned, like something from a century earlier. She stared at his truck as it approached, motionless, her pale face glistening with moisture. Henry's grip tightened on the wheel. He should have kept going. But the woman slowly lifted her arm. She didn't wave. She didn't shout. She simply pointed toward the unmarked exit. Henry felt a crushing pressure in his chest, not fear exactly, but something deeper, instinctive, primal. He pressed the accelerator. The woman didn't move as he passed. Didn't turn. Didn't step back. In the mirror, she stood perfectly still, her hands still raised, pointing into the darkness. Henry swallowed hard and tried to shake off the image. Maybe she needed help. Maybe she'd crashed somewhere. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Something inside him screamed not to. For 10 long minutes, the darkness pressed tighter around the truck. The swampy air seeped through the vents. The fog thickened, crawling across the road like fingers. Then the unmarked exit appeared again. Henry slammed the brakes. It was impossible. He had been driving straight at 70 miles per hour. There was no looping road. No side turns. No way the same exit could be ahead of him. And yet there it was. He checked the mirrors. Behind him, nothing. Ahead, the exit ramp waiting. A shiver ran down his spine. He forced himself forward, shaking, gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles were bone white. 5 minutes later, the exit appeared again. Same cracked asphalt. Same angle. Same mist. But this time, something else was there. The woman. Standing beside the ramp. Waiting. She wasn't pointing now. She was facing him directly, her head tilted slightly, hair dripping water onto the road. Henry whispered, "No, no, no." The GPS flickered. Then went black. Then displayed a single message. "Turn around." Henry's breath hitched. He slowed the truck. The woman stepped forward. Just one step. Her foot left a small wet print on the asphalt. Another step. Henry put the truck in reverse and backed away, hands trembling uncontrollably. The woman stepped into the center of the highway, blocking his path. Her head tilted further, unnaturally far, like her neck had softened. Then a sound filled the cab. Not from the radio. Not from outside. Inside. A whisper. Wet. Dragging. Inhuman. "Come back." Henry's entire body froze. Sweat stung his eyes. He forced himself to look into the mirror. Behind the truck, the swamp mist thickened. Something moved inside it. Tall. Thin. Barely visible. Leaning at an impossible angle, like its spine bent backward. Henry rammed the truck into gear and floored the accelerator. The woman screamed, a sound so high and sharp it cut straight through the cab like a blade. But Henry didn't look back. He drove until his vision blurred, until tears ran down his cheeks, until the mist finally broke. He nearly collapsed when the lights of a small 24-hour gas station appeared. He pulled in, shaking violently. When he climbed out, the humid night air felt like ice on his skin. He circled the trailer with a flashlight. And he froze. Along the back of the trailer were handprints. Small ones. Large ones. Hundreds of them. Smeared in wet streaks, as if palms and fingers had dragged desperately across the metal surface. Henry backed away. Inside the station, he asked the clerk if there was an exit between mile markers 20 and 25. The clerk, a young woman, frowned. "There hasn't been for 70 years, she said. There used to be an old road that led into the swamp. People went missing out there. They shut it down after what happened? Henry's voice cracked. What happened? She hesitated. Search and rescue found an old settlement in the swamp. Houses half sunk. Tools rusted into the mud. Like people just walked away one day. No bodies were ever found. Henry swallowed. What about a woman? The clerk's eyes widened. You saw her. Henry could barely nod. The clerk whispered, people say she leads travelers off the road. Into the swamp. They follow her thinking she needs help. But once they leave the highway, they're never seen again. Henry didn't sleep for 2 days. When he finally checked his dash cam footage, most of it was normal. But at 2:19 a.m., the video broke. One frame showed the woman standing beside the unmarked exit. The next frame, 1 second later, showed her face pressed against the passenger window of the cab. Her eyes were black. Her mouth open. Water dripping from her hair onto the glass. Henry never drove that stretch of I-55 at night again. Because he knew the exit wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. The end. Whatever crossed the road. It happened on Highway 24 in eastern Colorado, along the barren stretch between Limon and Calhoun, during a windless, moonless night in March 2020. The plains were flat and endless, the air cold enough to sting the lungs, and the darkness so complete it erased the horizon. Long-haul driver Jake Mercer, 49, was hauling fertilizer from Colorado Springs to Goodland. It was 1:57 a.m., the kind of hour when even the air feels hollow, and the world seems paused between heartbeats. Jake had driven that route countless times. He liked the solitude. The straight lines. The emptiness. Nothing ever happened out there, not traffic, not storms, not wildlife. Just miles and miles of open road. But that night, from the second he merged onto Highway 24, something felt wrong. The sky looked too dark, not storm dark, but unnatural, like the stars had been sucked out of the sky. The air inside the cab felt heavy, like he was breathing through wet cloth. And the headlights barely cut into the darkness ahead, as if the night were swallowing the beam. By the time he reached mile marker 318, Jake noticed something else. The engine grew quieter. Not stalled, not failing, just quieter. As if sound itself was being drained from the world. He turned off the radio. Nothing but dead static. He rolled down the window. No wind. No insects. No distant hum of civilization. Just silence. Deep, absolute silence. Jake felt a cold shiver crawl along his spine. He pressed the accelerator slightly, just to feel something, anything, respond. Then, far ahead of him, something stepped onto the highway. Jake froze. It wasn't a deer. It wasn't a person. It wasn't anything he had ever seen. It moved on 4 legs, but the legs were too long, too thin, bending at angles that made Jake's stomach twist. Its body was tall, almost horse-sized, but wrong in its proportions. Its spine arched too sharply. Its neck seemed to stretch too far forward. And its silhouette didn't match anything living in Colorado. Jake slowed down, staring through the windshield with dry, unblinking eyes. The thing stood perfectly still in the center of the road, facing away from him, as if listening for something. Its body trembled faintly in the beam of the headlights, the outline shimmering like heat waves. Jake whispered, "What the hell?" As if hearing him, the creature's head jerked upward. Not turning, snapping. The neck bent backward in a violent, unnatural movement until its head hung upside down, facing the truck. Jake's breath hitched. The face, if it was a face, was smooth, pale, and featureless. No eyes. No mouth. No nose. Just blank flesh, glistening faintly in the cold air. Jake slammed the brake pedal, sending the truck skidding across the asphalt. The trailer fishtailed. Gravel sprayed. The creature didn't move. It just stared at him with a face that had no eyes. Jake's heartbeat thundered in his ears. His throat tightened. He shifted the truck into reverse, tires screeching. The creature took a step toward him. The legs bent wrong. Too long. Too jointed. Each step made its body sway like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Jake threw the truck back into drive and swerved around it, nearly tipping the trailer. The wheels screamed. The cab rattled violently. As he passed the creature, it made a sound. Not a growl. Not a scream. A deep, vibrating hum, like metal vibrating underwater. The sound felt like it came from inside Jake's bones, not through his ears. He pressed the accelerator until the pedal hit the floor. The truck lunged forward. For a moment, Jake thought he was safe. The road stretched empty ahead, the creature falling away into the darkness behind. Then the radio crackled. Not static this time. A voice. Faint, broken, distant. Jake. He nearly dropped the wheel. No, no, no. The voice came again. Don't stop. Jake stared at the radio as the voice dissolved into static. Then something hit the passenger side of the trailer. Hard. The entire truck lurched sideways. Jake fought to keep it upright. Another hit. Then another. Something was running beside the truck. Jake didn't dare look, but instinct forced his head toward the right side mirror. His stomach churned. The creature was keeping pace. But now it was taller, its neck stretched upward, elongated grotesquely. Its body bent forward unnaturally, like it was being pulled faster than it could run. Its legs struck the pavement in jerky, silent movements that didn't match its speed. Jake turned the wheel sharply, trying to shake it off. The creature slammed into the trailer again, this time near the cab. Metal dented inward with a sickening crunch. The hum returned, louder this time, vibrating the windows, rattling the steering column. Jake's ears rang. He shouted incoherently and floored the truck again. 80 miles per hour. 85. 90. The creature kept up. Its body blurred at the edges, as if it weren't fully solid. Jake blinked hard, tears stinging his eyes. Not real, he whispered. Not real, not real. But the dents forming in the trailer were real. The thumps were real. The vibration in the cab was real. Far ahead, faint lights appeared, the outline of a junction. Civilization. Jake sobbed with relief. The creature suddenly veered left, its body twisting grotesquely until it skittered across the roadway on all fours, moving like a spider with broken legs. It slid into the darkness of the plains and vanished. Jake didn't slow down until he reached the junction, pulling into a truck stop at full speed. He killed the engine, jumped out, and staggered into the cold air. For a long moment he couldn't breathe. When he finally circled the truck with a flashlight, his stomach turned. Along the passenger side of the trailer were deep, parallel gouges, long, thin marks carved into the metal like claws or bones scraping at impossible strength. The gouges ran nearly the entire length of the trailer. And near the front, just behind the cab, was something worse. A handprint. Large. Elongated. With too many joints in the fingers. The metal around it was warped inward. Jake backed away, hands shaking violently. Inside the station, he found an older man mopping the floor. Jake asked him quietly, "Do things cross that road?" The man froze. Then he set the mop down. "You saw it," he said, voice low. Jake swallowed. "What is it?" The man shook his head. "No one knows. It's been out here longer than the highway. Longer than the towns. Some say it's something that never belonged to this land. Others say it used to be a man, twisted by something in the plains." Jake pressed a hand to his forehead. "Why did it follow me?" The man's eyes dimmed. "It follows anyone who sees it. Just be grateful you made it to the lights." Jake nodded slowly, breath trembling. When he later reviewed the dash cam footage, most of it was dark, static, flickering light, broken frames. But at 1:58 a.m., the camera captured a single clear image. The creature crossing the road. Its legs were long and jointed wrong. Its neck curved backward. Its featureless face glowed faintly in the headlights. And beneath its body, where its shadow should have been, was nothing. Just a blank, empty space. Jake still drives the planes, but he refuses to take Highway 24 after sunset. Because he knows what crosses that road. And he knows it saw him. The end.